So hello, everyone. As we try to make sense of what happened in Washington last week and what it means for America and for the rest of the world, we host today on our show Mr. Rick Wilson, political strategist and co-founder of the Lincoln Project, a Republican group that was formed in 2019 and is opposed to Donald Trump. He'll be talking to us about what it is at stake in the United States. Mr. Wilson, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
Now, I must confess, this was a very disturbing image for me. You know, I have lived my life myself. I have lived in the States for some time, and I never quite thought I would ever see events like this unfold. But especially, and politically speaking, Mr. Wilson, what was even more striking to analyze is why was police so unprepared, and how could conservatives disrespect institutions? What do you make specifically of that?
Well, let me answer the second question first. Conservatives would not have sought to overthrow a free and fair election. They would not have attempted to, by violent means, seize the capital of the United States and intimidate or threaten or as some of them were chanting, hang Mike Pence. They would not have done those things had they been conservatives. These folks are no longer conservative. They are Trumpist. They are nationalist populists. They are part of a growing authoritarian movement that was once the Republican Party. How the police could be so unprepared is a matter that we have to look at as a nation quite intensely. We have to examine the degree to which some members of the Capitol Hill police force apparently cooperated with the terrorists who attempted to take over the building that day. How some of them just admitted people to the building, just opened the gates and let them in. We also have to really take a hard look at whether or not a country like ours, which is proud of the fact that we have an open system of government, a pluralistic system of government, the redress of grievances is embedded in our Constitution. How is that compatible with the rising tide of violence on the Trump right?
You have set specific goals for Lincoln Project, one of them being your pledge that you're going to try to eliminate Trumpism. How long do you think it's going to take you, and do you think it's just a political problem?
It is definitely not just a political problem. It is a cultural problem. It is a civics problem. It is a values problem. And so the next part of this journey we will still continue to work in the political space to make sure that people who were the enablers of Trumpism, don't hold power, make sure the people who enabled Trumpism are politically, marginalized as best we can do. But it is going to be a longer fight and a broader fight when we deal with the cultural parts of why Trumpism is so corrosive and dangerous to this nation.
As far as the Republican Party is concerned, where do you believe it's going to go after Mr. Trump? Who do you think might emerge as the next leader? And might there be a chance of another political party, a split maybe between the more moderate Republicans and the more center-right ones, if not in the midterms?
I think you're seeing a growing schism right now in the Republican Party of whether or not you want to embrace a populist nationalism and authoritarianism, which is definitional to the Trump cult, or if you want to go back to the traditional values of the Republican Party of conservative probity, of the rule of law, of limited government, of the power and freedom of the individual. That I think there's a demand for that in the country. I think there's a necessity for a center-right party in the country. And I do think there's a chance that the two parties the two elements of the Republican Party will fracture very shortly.
Now, Mr. Wilson, how do you think can Joe Biden work and cooperate with this Republican Party we see right now? Not necessarily in the sense of legislation, because he seems to be in control of both houses of Congress, but in his efforts to bring the country together again.
Well, the problem here is that many of the people he would have to negotiate with are at this moment still saying that Donald Trump won the election. They don't accept him as the rightful president-elect. And so until those people make their move and accept the realities of the situation, it's very hard to argue that Joe Biden has to move to their position when their position is based on irrationality, conspiracy, and lies.
Now, I read, according to polls, roughly 4 out of 5 Republicans say Mr. Trump should be allowed to stay in office. His removal through the 25th Amendment being unpopular with Republicans at the time of the poll, despite the events we saw. Should, in your viewpoint, Donald Trump be impeached? What are the chances of this happening? And are you afraid of a new cycle of violence prior to Mr. Biden's inauguration or at a later point in time?
We're very concerned about another cycle of violence inspired by this president, inspired by his allies in the far right, in the media, and online. We are also concerned that the 25th Amendment should have been applied by Mike Pence and others. He refused to do so, which I think is a final condemnation of Mike Pence's role as vice president. He's an unserious person. He knew the risks the country faced. And ironically, Mike Pence was the target of the angry mob Donald Trump sent to the Capitol. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." They would have killed Mike Pence if they found him. And yet Pence remains loyal to Donald Trump to the very last.
Mr. Wilson, political strategist, thank you so much for your input in our program today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned on CNN Greece for more in-depth and breaking news stories.